So the Apostle Peter says, do not consider it strange that you should suffer fiery trials of many kinds. For when you do, the Spirit of glory and of Christ rest on you. My proposition has been this in discussing the baptism of fire, that fiery trials are both inevitable and necessary for the refinement of being as we shift away from being dominated by the impulses and demands of our fleshly human existence, even as our identity as sons of God emerge. Now, one thing I want to note here is fire has the capacity to consume everything that is fuel for that fire. But fire cannot consume anything where the refining work of fire has already been done. There's some things that are fireproof. Not because by their nature they resist fire, but because the work of fire has been done and there's nothing else left to be consumed. An example of this is gold. When gold has been refined in fire, all of the impurities, when it's fully refined, all of the impurities have been consumed in the flames. And what you have left is gold, pure gold, refined gold. And no one would think to put refined gold again through the fire. Why? Because it will not improve its nature. It will have served its purpose. Fire will have served its purpose to refine the metal. When that's done, you give attention to forming the metal into the shapes that are useful or that you intend, for which you intended to use the refined metal. Spirit in man, in mankind. By the way, anytime I say man, I'm referring to the genus of man. And if anybody's offended by that and thinks that every time I should say man or woman, grow up. Grow up. Neither male nor female, neither Jew nor Greek, neither bond nor free. It's a term of reference to an eternal thing. I'm not playing the games of today's sensitivities because I'm not a politician. I'm not trying to lead you. I'm not responsive to any pressure you may exert on me. I am a representation of the person of the living God. And mankind would do well to honor God, to respect God, to fear God, and to attribute certain basic courtesies to those who come in his name. By the way, there are rewards for that. And there are resistances to an alternative. I'm simply saying I'm not always going to say his and hers. It's sufficient that I say his because when I speak of the Spirit, I'm not talking about a male or a female. I'm not talking about someone's social class. I'm not talking about one's economics. I'm talking about sonship to God the Father, which is defined as sonship to a spiritual being who's not cast in human terms. All right? So I may not say that again, but if you ever find yourself offended, then you need to hear the things I'm saying about growing up and becoming mature. Because your position, though it may be what a generation and a particular age of people are obsessed with, believe it or not, eternal things are not obsessed, not even glancingly concerned about these things. And if you're going to be an eternal being, then you have to grow into. And if you're not, then I don't really care. So, enough of that. Fire delivers the refined material. And in this instance, your spirit is unaffected by the presence of God. Meaning, your spirit is not diminished, it's not refined by the coming of the presence of God. It's simply reconnected to its native environment. So, neither male nor female, neither Jew nor Greek, neither bond nor free. These are all characteristics of your human form, Son of Man. But Son of God is an eternal being. It's not even a heavenly being, although it has the capacity of living between the worlds, or living in the different worlds, living in the world of heaven, living in the world of, or in the realm of heaven, and living in the natural world. Your spirit is able to do both. It's what it's doing right now, being contained within your body. But it's also why it can connect to God while you're sitting in your seat and hear from God and have that other sound and is fitted with that other economy and all that makes you more than you actually appear to be to other people. Now, the refinement that is involved is the casting off. It's the burning away of the insistent flesh, where your humanity decides that it is preeminent above any and all other features of your existence. And the sooner you quell that notion, the sooner you bring the soul under the domination of this truth, the greater and sooner are your accesses to this new identity, which comes complete with an economy. It's not just an identity. There's a purpose for it, and there's an economy that sustains it. The purpose of this identity as a son of God is to carry the glory of God. And whatever is required to sustain you in carrying increasing weights of glory, God will supply by way of his economy. The baptism of the Spirit, then, is an ongoing process. The baptism of fire is an ongoing process, because you're refined from glory to glory. Now, the place of your refinement at certain junctures in your life is unique to that state of being at that time. But as you move on, and God inevitably moves you on. The Spirit of the Lord, that's why we pray, and lead us not into temptation, because the Spirit will lead us into wildernesses where the value of wildernesses is there are no distractions from what God wants to do at that time in your life. So sometimes you're going along and everything seems perfectly fine, and out of nowhere, new harrowing experiences arise. Our instincts are to try to claw back as quickly as we can to the last place in which we were comfortable and out of this torment and pain. And sometimes we're even resentful that God would so summarily disrupt our reverie and would so casually dismiss every aspect of the circumstance we have created to secure ourselves. People struggle to get the best job possible, and they may claw and leap their way forward over other people, and they get it, and they thank God for it. Or they buy a house, and please, I'm making no comment at all about these things as things to have. Everybody needs a house, and everyone desires one. That's not what I'm talking about. Everyone who is not independently wealthy needs to work. And so the desire to have a good job, to have a nice house, I'm not speaking anything against these things. I'm not implying anything against these things, all right? So stay with me. Stay with me. Unbeknownst to us sometimes, our motivation for to attain to these things is not merely the value of the thing itself. Having a good job, you have a place to give talent and ability and receive payment. A nice home, you have a chance to relax at the end of the day, a place to lay your head at night, in quiet resting places, peaceful habitation. God would give you such things, quite frankly. But it's not that for some people. And it's not about how much money you spend on a house or where the house is located. It's about expressions of your accomplishments. It's what it comes to mean to you beyond what the thing itself is. And so sometimes God will disturb those settled things that we've come to in order to spur new growth, new refinements. Sometimes we're going about doing things in a normal way, minding our own business, so to speak, and God summarily disrupts, comes in like a flood, or comes in like a wave, and disrupts. The normal, immature believer will say, "Why me? Why me, Lord? What have I done to make you so angry at me?" And idiot preachers will try to suggest there's something you've done that has gotten God mad at you, or upset with you. I knew this man who would say, when troubles came on him, which God, I knew the situations well enough to know, it was God visiting him to shake him up, to bring him on into more. But his response, when he'd tell me about it, God is kicking me in the face. I finally got tired of it, and I said, you have an extremely elevated view of yourself. That the living God would care enough about your existence to find pleasure in kicking you in the face. You think you're good enough to be the amusement of God in this bizarre way? But his history, of course, explained the thing fully. He spent his life trying to reach that place which another person explained to me, who had a much better understanding of it. The other person said to me one day, he said, you know, I heard you say that we're always asking God for results that mean we do not have to depend on God. We ask for more money, for better positions, better situations, so we don't ever have to depend on God. My respect for that man, we were walking on a beach in Florida when he told me that. My respect for him went through the ceiling because he was saying it with a penitent heart. My respect for the other fellow has never recovered because he's still in that place. When God visits us at certain junctures in our lives, he will disrupt what is normative for us. We make the mistake of thinking that all we did, we have done for him. We built whatever we built for him. And when he trashes it, we're offended. The truth is we should be penitent because what he's revealing to us is what we built out of the strength, the focus, the conviction of an erroneous perspective. But God let it go that way because it was the only way to highlight the thing that he wants to change. There was a point when, because this process was so frequent in my own life, I despaired. On more than 3 separate occasions in the course of my life, I've had to start over. And in innumerable smaller ways, but in 3 spectacular, attention-grabbing, headline-defining moments, I've had to start over. And almost nothing survived from what I had done or built in that prior time. The first times, the fiery trial was so extreme that I despaired. Later on, a spiritual son of mine, when he was going through some of his trials, told me how he didn't want to get out of bed. He wanted to pull the covers up over his head and just sleep because he was so depressed. Because everything he had built collapsed. Now, it wasn't that he had built inappropriately. It was that his assumptions as to where the people were with whom he had built were wrong. But God was showing him, like he said to Peter, "Do you love me more than these? Is your life more than fish, loaves and fish? Do you love me more than these? Because if you don't, I will disappoint you again and again until either you give up and walk away, or you change. The Lord meant to disrupt the rich young man and give him the true riches of the kingdom. But his entire righteousness was based upon how he had acted with his wealth in conjunction with the law that he was under. When Jesus showed him that which transcended the law and was greater wealth than money, he went away sorrowful because the greatness of his possessions was how he had come to identify himself. So God will always bring the fire to wherever you are. I think of Daniel in the lion's den, where a process was engaged based upon knowing that Daniel was going to behave predictably. It's one of the reasons I admire Daniel. He had reason to know that a trap was being set for him on the basis that he prayed every day with his window open toward Jerusalem, and very likely he prayed loudly. And it was at a time when Nebuchadnezzar wanted to be the only deity to whom all of Babylon prayed. And so Satan's craft was to have these sycophants tell Nebuchadnezzar he was all of that, so nobody ought to pray to anybody but him. And Nebuchadnezzar was enough of an inflated soul that kind of appeal to him, to his vanity, attached itself hard and fast to the emotions of his soul. Such a vain man delights. All vain men must be attended by sycophants. People tell him what he wants to hear. All vain men, all men who are delusional about, men and women who are delusional about their importance, must be attended by sycophants and cannot abide truth tellers. Because truth tellers are seen as disloyal. Truth tellers are seen as not team players, as not buying into the mythology of the great man. So such men end up eating grass because their minds become dimmed and corruptible eventually. But before they do, they listen to the blandishments of the serpent, of Satan, who at times also is defined as a lion. So Daniel ended up in the enclosure, in the entrapment of Satan. And the question is, what is the capacity of truth to blunt the attack of Satan? That's the story of Daniel in the lion's den. Yes, on a very domesticated, pedestrian view of it, yes, he literally ended up in a lion's den. One of my favorite paintings in the National Museum is the one rendered by the Dutch master, Rubens, of Daniel in the lion's den. It's terrifying to just see it. It evokes that kind of emotion that great art does. Peter Paul Rubens, I happened to see that particular painting. It was at the National Museum in Washington one of the years. This great Dutch master rendered it. It is true at that level Daniel was put in the lion's den. But in a greater way, part of the fire that we go through is experienced when the enemy thinks he's got us, that he's caught us. He came to Jesus 40 days in to the fast, thinking he got him. Comes to Daniel, thinking that the trap by the ambitious satraps who were jealous of his elevation over them now had been effectively sprung, and he was about to be lion food. What God tells us about the fire is he controls it. And even if it's the art form of Satan that entraps us, like Daniel in the den of the roaring lion, God will shut the mouth of the lion. You notice every time that Jesus answered Satan, there was not a follow-up. Command that these stones be made into bread. Jesus' response, man shall not live on bread alone, but by every word that proceeds from the mouth of God. And it shut him down. He had to go to the next thing and the one after that. And finally he left him. Because the enemy knows the immutability of truth. And when truth is incarnate in your person, the fire has done its work and you cannot be moved. 3 boys were taken in a similar way, also in Babylon. And the entrapment was they did not bow down to a false god, an evil representation, an effigy, if you like, of Nebuchadnezzar himself. And their refusal to bow down ended up in the fire, and a different outcome from stopping the mouth of the lion. Stopping the mouth of the lion means no weapon formed against you, no lying spirit working to overthrow you will consume your life. It can't happen. It cannot happen. That's why we have nothing to fear. That's why we shouldn't make excuses. That's why when God is dealing with us, we don't ask, why are you doing this to me? We ask, what am I supposed to learn? What am I to know? What am I to come to in what you are doing? I wish to cooperate with you. That has to be our response to the baptism of fire, because we understand that fire is not our enemy. It's only the enemy of those components of our being that need to change, and that this is the time for the change. And that when this fire has done its work, you will carry the glory of God in an even more exalted and elevated fashion. You will be more like him when he appears as fire. refining you. And that's what the 3 Hebrew boys found. Those who threw them into the fire, the heat was such that it killed them. But they themselves, their chains were loosed. Somehow, their bindings were released. Because when the enemy has done everything he's allowed to do to you, and you're still standing, albeit in the fire, what else can he do to you? You're free. You're free. The enemy is bound by the limitations of his own fear. And the thing he fears the most is the presence of God. When you are in the presence of God, you're totally exposed. That's what makes it fearful for some, for most. And the enemy would be exposed in the same way, because everything in the presence of God is humbled. It is brought low. Nothing exalts itself against the majesty of God. Everything that comes in his presence in any pretentious way is disclosed for what it is. That's why so much is done to obfuscate, to confuse, to hide, to make appear to be something other than what it is. The pretentiousness of men and the lying nature of their spirits. That's why deceivers and evildoers fear the sons of God. But they're not intimidated at all by those who are in their hearts harlots to the power that these people have over them. That's a story for another time. And I'm concluding this message now. Those 3 Hebrew young men found in the fire that they were free. There were no chains. They weren't defined by the environment of the fire, because when they were loosed, they didn't smell like smoke. They weren't consumed. But in fact, a 4th man appeared amongst them. And Nebuchadnezzar said, "What are my eyes seeing?" There were not 3 cast in? How come I'm seeing 4? Because when you look into the fire, you're actually looking into the eternal. And you see the fellowship of God with those who have no bargain with him, because obedience precludes any notion of a bargain. Obedience, however, accesses the overflow of divine grace. How do these things work? Well, not by any reason that you can come up with, because this is about the otherness of God, the otherness of the eternal. The fact that it is not quantifiable, it's not definable, it's not measurable, it's not sustained by anything of this earth. We ought always have known that by the elementary doctrine of the baptism of fire. Instead, we live generally in an environment today in which even believers are wanting to get out of discomfort that God has ordained for their refinement. And most who say they are believers will avoid the fire in exchange for the cool walla. You know, like a hog in the walla? The cool walla of their own creations. The time for the bringing back and the updating of these elementary doctrines is now. Because what is being shown uncontrovertibly is the fact that the majority of people today who say they are believers are deficient in their foundational understandings. It's one of the responsibilities of the apostolic to restore the foundation and to help with the rebuilding of the walls. Indeed, we are not bringing a new foundation. These things may sound new to your ears, but we're not bringing a new foundation. For no other foundation can any man lay than that which is already laid, which is Christ Jesus. In every aspect of everything I say, you will hear and you will see the centrality of Christ. I am, by every indication, by every metric, and so is my gospel, Christocentric, for there is no other center. He's the way to the Father. He's the truth of who the Father is, and he is the life, the way, the truth, and the life, because he's the life of God on display amongst us and in us. So may grace and peace be multiplied to you, and may your faith be enabled by these sayings. I'm Sam Solon. We'll continue with the elementary doctrines, and we will talk about the certain administrations that have to do with the laying on of hands. Until then, I'll see you next time. Goodbye for now.
May mercy, grace, and peace be with you always. Thank you for watching.